Welcome to another episode, and in today's show we're going to talk about procrastination. I actually said that right.
You said it right first time. I wish I could say
exactly.
it right.
So procrastination, and that's such an important topic because I think that's one thing that stands between us and whatever it is that we're trying to achieve. What does procrastination mean to you?
I would have said it was equal to laziness, right? That seems to be the idea, is that, I'm too lazy to do a particular job or a task. But to me, I would say now, look, I'm an older fella than I was, many years ago. I think today I've realized it's probably more to do with the fear of wanting to complete something for whatever emotional, mental reason. You can have a list of things you've got to complete and achieve, and then there is something that's holding you back. So for me, procrastination, and I got it right as well.
You said it right then.
Yeah, because you said it and I copied you. I think it has its kind of roots in fear.
Yeah, no. And when I think of procrastination, I'm thinking it's, you're putting off something that you need to do somewhere, into the future, right? So it's just kind of this block somewhere, right? But let me share a quick definition that I found very relevant to this conversation. It's a needless, voluntary delay that has a negative impact in our life. So, and the reason why that's important is because there are times when it's actually useful to, put something, not to do something right now, right? Put it into the future sometime, and sometimes there's a very good reason for that. But the key thing here is we know we got to do something, but we don't, right? So is there, what are the top maybe one or two things that you find, where you procrastinate?
I'll tell you one or two things, but when we talked about this topic offline, Albinder, I was like, I remember one of my good friends at university on my design course, named Ian from Liverpool. He was a full-on Scouser. And I think it was at the end of our first year, or beginning of the second year, and he said to me, he's like, "All right, Dr. Doolittle." And I'm like, "What?" And he's like, "You're fucking Dr. Doolittle, mate." And I was like, "Why?" Because you do fuck all, mate. You do nothing. And his point was that when we have projects, he felt that I was doing the bare minimum, and I was putting things off. And, it was a bit of a joke, but subconsciously it was something that I was like, I definitely had a fear of revising, had a fear of completing, and it's not that I'm not a busy personality, I would find other things to do that internally for me was justifying why I actually hadn't done the thing. Do you get what I mean? Like, so the hierarchy of things that I had to do, I would say to myself subconsciously and consciously, but I've done this and I've done that and I've done this and I've done that, knowing that there was that one particular thing. And today, look, I'm a lot better at it. Trust me, like I absolutely kill it. But I think around the house, there are things, the hubby list is probably my weakest area of shit that I've been told that needs to be done around the house or outside of the house, but to do with the property. And that is probably the area where it's like, I'm putting it off, and I'll be like, but I'm working on my book, or I'm working on this project, I'm working on work stuff, and knowing that I have to complete it.
And when you said that hobby list, that resonated with me, because you know what, even for me, it's not the big stuff that's causes most of us to procrastinate, right? It's usually the mundane, routine tasks, doing the dishes, cutting the grass, doing the laundry. It's usually around that. And you know what, just before we actually move forward with this, I just want to share that at the end of this video, I'm going to share something that I learned that's grounded in science. It's an equation, a lot of research behind it. That is, I think, going to bring all of this conversation together in a way that is going to be very useful for anybody who listens. So stay tuned to the end of the show, and we'll have a 5 or 7 minute segment where we're going to unpack that equation. I think that'll be very useful. But one of the things you touched upon is, the importance of that goal or that perceived goal. You get what I'm saying, right? So oftentimes it's like when you're doing the dishes, you kind of procrastinate. When you've got to cut the lawn, doing the laundry, I find those are the areas where I procrastinate personally the most. But if it's something around a tight deadline, something of high value, then I typically find that I'm much more motivated to actually go ahead and get it done. So I think when it comes to procrastination, one of the important pieces to this puzzle is definitely, the clarity of the goal, how important that goal is to you, how meaningful that goal is to you. And I think there's a really cool tie-in there with this idea of procrastination, because if it doesn't mean anything to you, if it's not urgent, then there's a tendency to say, I'll do it tomorrow, I'll do it the day after, right? So do you find that that's kind of along the lines of what you're talking about?
I would say, in a similar sense, yes, but like I started off by saying, I think there is this word fear around it. So I learned personally from not potentially doing as well as I could have academically, getting the higher grades that I should have. And I know it was because I didn't invest the time and effort. I procrastinated around it and made excuses why. And so I learned from, those, situations to make sure that I don't do those. So similar to yourself, work-wise, extracurricular projects, all of these things, I don't procrastinate, period. Like I really don't. I'm onto everything because I've learned, because of fear and that emotional fear. And for me, it's an emotional fear, or it's an emotional trigger.
Nice.
Thanks, Diljit. That is something that I've had to overcome on my own personal journey, and what I talk about obviously in my book and stuff. And so now I've overcome that stuff. And for me, I go head first into that kind of it's like watching season 4 of Stranger Things. Everything's very dark and they're going into these dark places that are quite scary. I'm happy to do that for things that matter. But it's like you said, the hubby list or the honey list. I was asked to do the ceiling of the driveway and all of the concrete around the house, because hey, the guys were just charging too much and doing a crappy job. And so I procrastinated on that for about 2 months, and my excuse was that I'm looking for the best sealer, I'm looking for the best equipment, and I'd get 4 or 5 days put off. It was just the fear internally of me not doing the job well enough. That was, if you really ask why it took 2 months for me to do it, it was the fear that I wasn't going to be able to do it well and something was going to mess up. And I was okay with it, because for me it's like, look, you're always hitting the marks over here, but it's okay here. But it's a fear. It really, for me, is, deep down, there's a fear of failure, I think.
And I think we all have that, right? It's not exclusive to any one person. I think how successful you are, it doesn't matter if you're a CEO of a Fortune 500 company or, whatever it is that you do. I think that's a natural process that we all go through. But what I find interesting is this idea that, when you're not in flow, let's say, right? When the goal is, you perceive the goal as too far out, right? Too hard, or you feel that the goal is all the way up there, but your skills or abilities and knowledge around that topic, around that situation, are not quite where they need to be. And that's almost like the point you got to get to, because that builds that intense trust in ourselves, right? That I can do this, I got this. So, one of the key strategies, for example, around, I'm going to use a mundane example, doing the dishes, right? As crazy as it sounds, I apply this formula to it, right? I stopped looking at doing dishes as something that is, about cleaning dishes. I started to look at it from a more holistic perspective, because when I do the dishes and I do my chores around the house, it shows the kids that I'm part of the family unit, shows us that teamwork, right? And definitely that hobby list, right? I'm scoring points, right? When I'm doing the dishes, right? Absolutely. I'm scoring points, and I'm looking like I'm shining here, right? Yeah. So I like that. So once I change that perception, right? And again, it's a mundane example, but if we're talking about that fear or a mental block of some kind, right? It allows us to move through it in a different way, because the way I'm perceiving that now is no longer just about the dishes. It's about, creating harmony within our family unit. It's about creating harmony between myself and my wife, because I'm pulling my weight. I'm contributing. I'm, one of your 3 C's in your book, right? Contribution, right? I'm contributing to the household here. And, when I started to look at it from that perspective, things started to change for me, because and it moves us in the right direction, I think. And I think that's a neat takeaway that we could probably all kind of reflect on, that how can we change the perception of what it is that we're doing, in a slightly different way that causes us to move forward in a constructive way.
Yeah, I think, it's like I said at the beginning, the lazy description of that word which I've completely forgotten, procrastination. Procrastination is lazy. Yeah. The lazy description of it is the word lazy, because it isn't. It's like you're saying, if you are able to put this holistic kind of like label on it, to say it's not washing the dishes, it's me being a part of the family unit, that you suddenly now feel, oh, okay, it's me being able to show the kids that, hey, I am one of those dads that actually, wears the pants and doesn't wear the pants, and I'm able to wash dishes and there's nothing wrong with it. Do you get what I mean? Like, culturally and society-wise. So I think it's the perception. And when we say perception, then we know it's the conversations that are happening internally. Procrastination, if it's an emotion or if it's fear, it's a conversation that's needs to be had internally. And I think, we can bash this topic for hours, but I think it goes back to the question of how much or how willing are you to have those internal conversations, to ask yourself, hold on, Abinda, there's a pattern here. You procrastinate on all of these things. You continue to do. It's not 1 year, it's 5 years, it's 15 years, it's 20 years. Why are you continuing to procrastinate on these, and why are you making excuses up? When we have those conversations, they're those tough they can be challenging conversations. It's only when you're able to go through that list of excuses and then finally be like, I don't really have a justification. I think that's when you start to kind of clear, you start to see the sky as opposed to the clouds.
I like that, because I think it allows us to do some reflection, to introspection, and that idea of a self-inventory, right? Kind of ahead of time, look at it and say, okay, what are the things that cause me to not do the things that are required in life, right? Yeah. From the smallest things to the big things, right? So I think that's a really neat point.
I was listening to Margaret Atwood, one of the greatest novelists, Canadian, which is the coolest part. And Margaret was talking about how, she doesn't get, when she says, I'm about to sit down and do the churn of writing a book or working on a manuscript, then, the question is, do you get distracted by, this thing? And she's like, no. Why? Well, because I've turned it off.
Nice.
Do you get distracted by the weather and you could be sitting outside writing as opposed to in a particular room? No. Why? Because I choose to have my desk positioned in a particular place in my writing room, and I don't see, or I don't need to see, or I don't need to have that distraction. So for me, she's similar to what you were just saying. She's going through that list, that introspection list of these are the things around me that will distract me from completing a task at hand. And so for her, writing a book equals income. You know, that's what she does. Doing a honey list or a hubby list for us just means we don't get shit, you know, from our, you know, significant others, and you know, the that look and that cold shoulder. And so we try, and I'm sure if we span our 15, 20, you know, odd years plus of relationship and marriage, and I'm sure we all say, no, we definitely are heading in the right direction as opposed to the opposite direction. But there's also that voice in my head personally, which is, look, you're hitting all the marks in so many other areas. It's okay for you to drop the ball a little bit in these. Like, you don't have to be, like, as far as Cindy is concerned, I should be a fully professional, certified construction worker. Meaning she expects for me to be able to build basements, do the electrical work, do the plumbing. It's like, well, how come you can't do it? My dad, do you know what I mean? And I've a few years ago, like, look, I don't do that stuff. Yeah. And that's just, I do everything else. I can do so many other things, but I will not do those. Because there was a point where I may procrastinated on, I think I can do it, and then never do it because I know I can't do it.
It just goes back to
fear of doing it, and
it goes that point. It just goes back to the skills, right? When the goal is too far from you that you can't see it, right? Or your skills don't match that. It's very hard to get into a state of flow, right? Like,
so it's when it's not goal orientated, when it's too broad, when your design brief or your description it isn't specific enough. I think that's also an excuse, but I didn't know this needed to be done like this and at this time by then. You know, those are excuses you can make to say, well, that's why I haven't done it, because it wasn't defined clearly.
And, you know, as you're saying that, I'm thinking to myself, okay, how many of us get distracted from doing the things that we need to do? And it often starts off as just for 1 minute. I'm just going to check Facebook for 1 minute. I'm just going to check Instagram for 1 minute. I'm just going to go on a news site for 1 minute just to take a break, right? Mm-hmm. That 1 minute becomes 2 minutes, and 2 minutes becomes 3 minutes. And it's that level of distraction that pulls us away from that kind of deep, concentrated work that when we're in flow, when we're in the zone and we're just getting the thing done, right? At a pro level, then it's those distractions and it's that lack of clarity in our goals. It's a lack of clarity in our intentions. It's a lack of clarity in our behaviors that align us with that ultimate goal. And it all starts off with one of the things you mentioned, that awareness, whether it's a self-inventory, that example you gave of Margaret Atwood, right? Or whether it's some other way we do that. I think that's a huge plus. An important point here is what we need to do is we need to figure this stuff out earlier, because almost we have to play offense as opposed to defense. Once we realize that the only thing between us and accomplishing that goal is our procrastination, is our own fears, is our own mental blocks, then what we need to do is sometimes, just pull our socks up and just get it done, right? And it's not about completing the whole thing, it's about taking that first step.
It is, and so as you were talking, I was trying to think about how have I kind of, achieved meeting, deadlines or requirements. And so from 8 a.m. to say 5 to 6 p.m., that's my work period. That's where I'm dedicated to my job. And from about 6 to 11, that's my family's. From every 5 days a week, 6 to 11, I rarely will do work. I'll do it. Trust me, I'll sit sometimes at a laptop if nobody else needs me. But I've had to say to myself subconsciously that is a period of time where dishes, vacuuming, cleaning, doing stuff, going for walks, anything, kids, driving lessons, whatever it is today. Like, 5 years ago it was playing, with a ball in the garden. Yesterday was an hour driving lesson because Vita wants to learn to drive. But that 6 to 11 is their time.
Yeah.
And then for all of my, I want to do this, I want to create this, I want to write this, I want to do all of that, that's typically from 11 till 1 o'clock. So this way, internally, I'm not getting frustrated like, I want to work on my book.
Yeah.
No, that's their time. So I internally know that if I get asked to do something, just bite my lip and I will have to do things, because subconsciously I've said to myself 6 to 11 is their time. Weekends is up for grabs. But Monday to Friday, that is one of the techniques I've used to make sure that I can do all the things that are required of me to be done work-wise, family-wise, and also my own projects. And that way there are no excuses.
Well, that's a good point, Dalt. What if you have a chaotic schedule? Well, you know what? You know what? One of the most important techniques or strategies that any one of us can deploy when we want to operate offensively, when we want to operate in a way that is conducive to moving us towards our goals, is time blocking, right? So when we pre-commit, see, the thing is, when it comes to our willpower, willpower is finite. All the researchers tell us that now, right? You have a certain amount of willpower, right? So if we go around playing defense all day, and then, this fires up, like you're saying, the kids want to do something, and then you got to do this and you got to do that, using your willpower to stay on track, you're going to deplete your willpower. But when you time block and when you pre-commit and use that willpower offensively to say, okay, here's what I got to get done today, right? Here's the important outcomes that I've got to achieve today. Here are the important outputs I've got to go do. Then what happens is that takes thinking out of it. Like, I'll give you a simple example, right? There was a time that I wanted to get up in the morning and just, do my prayer, do my meditation, and then, do a workout. And it wasn't until I deployed this very technique, time blocked it, and figured out what time I had to go to sleep the night before. It wasn't until that point that I took my feelings and thinking out of it, right? And what I almost did is, instead of, I'm going to do this when I feel like it, flipped it around and said, I'm going to do what needs to be done. And then, you know what? I'll worry about the feelings later. And you know what the funny thing is? When you do that and just follow the plan and you work the plan and do what you need to do, you get to a point where after that workout, you've got those athletic induced endorphins flowing throughout your body, and you feel like $1 million. You feel better, your mental health, right? Physically, right? And then you go take a shower, you get ready for work, and you're ready to nail the day, right? So time blocking is I think a huge strategy, and it'll directly help with procrastination, along with a whole bunch of other stuff.
I kind of agree, and I'd say
just kind of?
Kind of agree in the sense that your schedule may be more heavy Friday, Saturday, Sunday, yet your Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday mornings, early afternoons are probably completely open. So what you do is, as Arvinder was saying, you flip things around. And so for you now, it would be, right, I know I can't be there for my family, my friends, evenings typically, and definitely weekends. And so for you, you'd have to say, but I can be there for myself and my family and friends early mornings through to, say, early mid-afternoons, Monday through to Friday or Thursday. And so suddenly you found the same amount of time that I may find on a weekend and late evenings, and you've suddenly gone, oh shit, I've suddenly got 6 hours or 12 hours in the week to do what I want to do, as well as meet the requirements. Because it is time management, it is blocking out the time. But it is an internal conversation, because there is that emotional connection to why you don't want to do a certain topic or a certain task.
And that can't be understated, right? That internal conversation is where it's at, period. Because guess what? Everything we do on the outside, in the physical world, is at some level, whether subconscious or conscious, it's a manifestation of a thought process or something, right?
I don't know if I can throw this stock out of Gurbani, but manjite,
Jagjit. Yeah.
right? You know, it's heavily used, but if you conquer your mind, they say you can conquer the outer world or the universe, whatever. But you literally have to. It is a conversation with self and the fear, and then it's also the cool thing is. It's okay that you procrastinated or you continue to. The question is, do you reduce the amount that you've been doing over a period of a year or 5? Do you know what I mean? Are you heading in the right direction or are you actually going backwards? That's the question to ask. And if you feel like you're not moving or you're going backwards, then we need to have a conversation to say, why are you not progressing? Why does it look like? Because life is just going to pile more on you. Do you know what I mean? We go to school, our excuse is, I can't do that, I've got assignments to do, I've got tests to revise for. And we can only use those for as long as we're at school. And then outside of school, then suddenly real life slaps you on the side of the head, and suddenly you've got that, as well as that, as well as that, as well as this. And then if you feel like you're either standing still or you're slipping backwards, that's when it's hey, you need a real internal conversation to say, there's going to be, whether it's a reset or whether it's actually the input of a chip to say, yeah, we need to figure this one out, because it can put you in a hole quicker than most things, because you feel like, I'm never able to achieve anything, I'm never able to complete anything, and around you people are. And that's normally the biggest thing, is that everybody else seems to be moving forward, and I seem to be kind of on that kind of a 1980s video from the song, I'm on a road to nowhere, and the guy's like on a treadmill and really going nowhere. That's a concern.
Yeah, just want to touch upon that the Gurbani, you talked about Manjite Jagjit, right? From a spiritual perspective, I think, when we go ahead and kind of, focus our mind, and I like to think of goal setting now in different areas of my life, and that starts off with your energy, right? How you feel. Zest is one of those virtues that is highly correlated with your overall well-being. And if you think of it, no matter what you're trying to do, whether it be spiritual, whether it be something to do with your work, something to do with your family, right? If you're tired, right, then things aren't going to work out well, just generally, or probability stacked against you on the wrong end of the equation here, right? So I think that's really important to kind of create some goals around your energy, create some goals around your spirituality. And this is not a one-time aha moment. Working on your mind, working on your thought processes, working on your emotions to become the best version of yourself it's more like a zigzag. It's not a straight linear upwards line, right? So we're going to fail, we're going to fall, and it's about getting back up. Fall 7, rise 8. Fall 7, rise 8, right? I'd love to, if there's a tattoo, I'd love to get that on my arm. Fall 7, rise 8. It's about that resiliency, right? And even in spirituality, because sometimes we get stuck in this rut that it has to be this way or that way. But I think that spirituality kind of it seeps into those other areas of your life, right? And I think it starts off with that energy piece, right? Getting that energy piece right, because then you're less reactive, more responsive, right? And these are all important tools to live with virtue, and be that person that that you want to become spiritually as part of your faith or what have you, right? And it all starts with the mind. I think you've nailed it. Now, just I guess, how do we take that now and create some realistic goals? Because I think one of the things that's coming out of this conversation, and we've all used in our own lives, is we need to be going in the right direction. Because guess what? If a journey of 1,000 miles starts off with one step, guess what happens when I take that step in the wrong direction? I end up 1,000 miles in the opposite direction of where I want to be. So getting real clear about what it is that's important And those goals have to mean something to me. They have to be meaningful, right? They have to be achievable. They have to be something that you not only want to, but this is the self-concordant goals, right? So without those, I think, perhaps that's one of the lessons here is that we need to really get clear with our goals and be more specific. And just to cap this segment, this piece off, there was a Harvard Business Review blog. It was one of the most popular blogs in the Harvard Business Review, and I think it was something like traits of a successful person. I think the top thing in that was how specific their goals were. So they're not just goals; they knew exactly what that they wanted to achieve, and they were able to break that down to a daily goal, right? And constantly be moving towards that goal every day. And so I think that's really important. And another fundamental piece to this conversation is, a lot of the research. Let me ask you guys, Dali, you're off camera, but call and just jump in though. What do you think the number one cause, or what people say that causes them to procrastinate? What do you guys think it is?
Too busy.
Too busy? What do you think, Dal? Energy. So along the lines of energy, fatigue, being tired is when people are surveyed through all these different surveys, it's usually the number one thing is why do people procrastinate? Because I'm tired. So what does that tell us? We need to nail down that foundation of eating, moving, sleeping, right? It kind of ties into the rest of our life.
So I'd expand on that then, because I would say, look, last night my son had his friends over. They were up until I think 12:31. Vera had her cousins over. There's a lot of noise, dog barking. I decided I was on episode 8. I've got 2 more episodes of Stranger Things. I want to just get it out of the way because I heard that these last 2 or 3 were like 2-hour plus episodes. Yeah, like they literally are movies. And I was like, look, I've got other things I need to watch when I work out. So I just want to get this stuff out of the way. So I think I was going to be watching until about 1:30 this morning, knowing that we had agreed to be up in here around 9:30. And so the tiredness or the energy for me, I think, is less physical and more emotional.
Nice point. I like that.
I don't sleep for more than 5-6 hours, and yet I will go for the remaining kind of 18 hours of the day. And you can speak to everyone around me. I'm not one that typically complains that I'm tired, because I'm not.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's because physically I'm in the best shape of my life. I kind of am, because I used to be out of shape.
Oh, I remember we both were at one point, right?
You trained me, 20 odd years ago.
I remember those days.
And so it's because I think emotionally I'm not tired.
Yeah,
I think it's my emotional, I'm perky and ready to go, sending you guys messages at 7. I was up at 6:40, and so around 7 something I was like, okay, chaps, we good, blah, blah, blah. So I think and again, I'll reflect to what I kind of focused as the title of my book, which was The 3 Houses. And for me, that emotion, not being emotionally tired or lacking of energy is the fact that it's the contentment of who I am and what I think I can achieve. Because I've never, over the past decade, I don't look at the world's greatest CEOs or the most famous people or the best writers or the best anything. I no longer look at these individuals and go, oh wow. For me, it's completely achievable.
Yep.
By everyone, all of us. It just depends on the amount of effort and time and self-belief you have in any particular topic. That's just my approach to life. So for me, contentment, commitment, again, to commit to a task, to complete it, is key. So for me, those 2 houses are a part of my thing. And so I just gave you a great example, though, of a time just 3 months ago where I was told to do the concrete ceiling, and I was fearful. It was a fear of not doing a good job as the contractor for the last 2 years. And so I still have that. I'm still suffering from it. But my excuse internally is, it's for the not so important things versus the important things. And at some point, can we kind of zero it out? Possibly. But I think the energy or the lack of is an emotional one as opposed to a physical one.
I like that. For the most of us, I think that works really well, like you said, in a lot of situations. That emotional piece, I think, is really important, and that gives us that soul force, just to go get it done, right? Yeah, that zest for life. So, I think on the flip side of that equation, on the other side of it, the reality is, in terms of, for most of us, if we don't get a good night's sleep, and that could be 5 or 6 hours for you, but the majority of the public, majority of society, what science and research is telling us, most of us need anywhere between 7 to 9 hours, right, to get the right amount of deep, restful, restorative sleep. So I think it's more about that deep, restorative sleep. So when we wake up, we're not feeling groggy, we're not feeling fatigued, we're not feeling tired, we're feeling energized, right? And from there, we can move forward. So I think, yes, there's an individualistic a level up for every individual, and it differs for a lot of people. But just as a general rule, the idea is to make sure that you're getting enough sleep, so it's deep and restorative, that you're not spending that time on Instagram or Netflix, right? And watching somebody else's drama. Go make your own drama in a positive way, of course, right? Instead of watching somebody else's drama and somebody else's life fold on TV, right? So I think it's about just contextualizing what works for me. How do I get to the next level? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So just, we talked about this conversation earlier on, and this formula that we were going to share with. Perhaps we can have a little conversation about that, and I'll share it with everybody, because I think it's a really important tool, right?
Please.
So Piers Steel is a psychologist, very well-renowned psychologist, and he received the Nobel equivalent, in psychology for an award. He did a lot of research around the science of motivation. And he came up with a formula, right? And that formula is motivation, equals expectancy multiplied by value.
So E times V.
E times V over, right? Impulsivity times delay. So just generally speaking now, and when we think of what that actually means for us, right? I like to look at that equation now, and I always try and start on the value piece, right? Because for me, I look at goal setting and different goal setting models, right? And Piers Steel has one too. And what he talks about is the goal has to be something that is, I had it written here because I knew I'd have to refer back to it. But number one, the goal has to be challenging, it has to be meaningful, and it has to be feasible. So think of that for a second. Challenging, meaningful, and feasible. And everything we've talked about, right? The more meaningful that goal is, that example that you gave, that you had 5 or 6 hours sleep, but you didn't want to procrastinate and say, we'll do it another day, right? It was really meaningful for you, and sometimes so it offsets some of those other variables, right? So, but in an ideal world, if it's challenging, if it's meaningful, and the challenging piece is really important too, because guess what? It's like a rubber band. If that goal is too hard or too high, and your skill level's over here, the tension on that rubber band is going to cause that rubber band to snap, right? That's not good either, right? It's about finding the right amount of tension. It's got to be challenging because you want to push yourself outside your comfort zone, because that's where the magic happens. And feasible because, and then you got to take that big goal and break it down in what do I need to get done today. So that's number one, right? When it comes to goal setting. So I'm just talking about that value piece right now. Second thing, it has to be specific. We talked about that, right? When the goal is kind of pinpoint, laser, we get to that level, right? I know exactly what the goal is, what I need to do to get there, the steps, right? When I want to get it done by, and you can even add how I'm going to measure that, right? That becomes an important tool in you achieving that goal. And number 3 is in Piers Steel's goal setting model is creating mini goals. We just kind of touched upon that, right? Take that big goal, break it down. And then the last one, which I love, because this is the part I think, unbeknownst to me, I used in my life, right? Especially around working out and meditation in the morning, is creating routines. Creating the environment, creating the systems, so you don't have to think about it, right? You get up in the morning, you do your meditation, you do your prayer, you're thankful, you're in a state of gratitude for this very breath. Forget anything else. For this very, very breath the divine has given you, right? Then you go nail a workout, right? All without thinking, because you've already pre-committed to this idea and you've created a routine around it. Guess what? The compound effect takes place, right? So anyways, that piece is really important, the value piece, right? Now, expectancy, we've touched upon that also. So what we want to do is create the numerator. If it's out of 10, we want these numbers to be really high, right? And this is the neat piece of this equation, is that we can start to make small adjustments in our own lives, in those variables, to make sure that the expectancy and the value, those things are high. Then, impulsivity times delay. We want to keep that number low. We talked about this thing. Things that are, just 1 minute, and I'll get back to my work, or I'll get back to doing this, right?
Distractions.
Guess what? Pre-commit to this, do what you need to do, like you said about Margaret Atwood. Shut this thing off, put it like in a totally different room, because for the next hour and a half, I'm committed to doing what needs to be done, right? Period. It's a choice we have to make, and we have to follow through with that, right? So that's the impulsivity, right? And then the delay. Your example about your academia, right? What happens when a paper is, Dali, you just finished a course, right? What happens is when you know you have 3 months to do that paper.
You become Dr. Doolittle.
Yeah, become Dr. Doolittle. Or you're like, I'll do it tomorrow. I'll do it the next day. Oh, I gotta go out with my friends. I gotta do this. I gotta do that.
You do fuck all.
Right? And then you got 1 week left. Oh, lo and behold, it's done in 2 days. So now, imagine
which is a very, very, very common thing for high school students, college students, university students. Like it is, I think if we went through a laundry list of what are the things that the vast majority of them do, I think it is procrastination. 100%.
Yet
it's not talked about or taught.
And that's the part right there. You know, the whole education system is, based on whatever it was, the Industrial Revolution, right?
Absolutely.
But if we look at what we learn after we finish high school, college, university, get a job, do all of those things, it's like then the real learning happens. Okay, this is how. Now, I guess, just to be fair, maybe, that's kind of built into the school system, that when they set deadlines, they expect you to go and do certain things.
It is, but let's look. I may have been labelled lazy at school, but nobody ever said to me that, kid, this is an emotional thing. This is a fear of, so let's have a conversation. No one ever did. That came from my own learning.
And you know what? If there's one book I can recommend, I think everybody should read. It's Psycho-Cybernetics by Dr. Maxwell Maltz, and he talks about the self-image. And he's the guy who kind of the who's who. Back in 1960, he popularized the term self-image. And I read that book every so often, or just listen to it through an audio on YouTube or something, because it is like the foundational work that all of these other people, whether it's sports psychology, whether it's all these techniques of visualization and rubbing that visual, it all comes from this guy, right? So just now, if we look at that delay, we're talking about delay, right? So once we understand that equation, motivation equals expectancy times, what was the other thing? Expectancy times value, right? Over impulsivity times delay, right? That's a tool. If you want to read upon this further, Piers Steel, right? I think the book's called the Motivation Principle. I think I'd have to check it again. It's been a while, right? But point being is, there's a tool, right, that we can start using in our own lives, and then make those small adjustments. And I think if there's any one way we want to finish this conversation, is just get started. Not like
Don't procrastinate.
Don't procrastinate, but
On
not
the
even
topic.
that. You know, sometimes when we think of that and we think of the big goal
Yeah.
and we think of the Nike logo, just do it, right?
Yeah.
It can be too big sometimes and disencourage. It can. You don't get inspired. Exactly, like the school project, right?
Yeah. Chop it down.
Chop it down,
Right?
and then. But the key fundamental here is just get started. And I like to look at it when I meditate now. I know my mind's gonna wander.
Yeah.
When I'm sitting there doing Guru Mantra Jap and saying
Yeah.
Vaheguru, Vaheguru, Vaheguru in a special rhythmic way, right? What happens is the mind wanders,
Let it
right?
wander.
But you know, it's a funny thing. I've gotten used to it because it's like, just get started again.
That's right. Let it
Just
wander.
get started again. And I teach this to my kids because it's about realizing that we're going to fall down, fall 7,
Yeah.
rise 8, and then always have that kind of, get that tattooed in your brain,
Yeah.
right? Just get started. So whatever you are, take that next step. Take that next step, because once we do that, it's like, you know what? Just putting your runners on when you want to work out and just doing that first minute, even if you don't feel like it, you'll probably end up doing the whole workout and you'll feel a lot better for it.
You know, and meditation is like licking a rock and expecting to get a taste out of it. That is the
nice.
best way to do it.
Yeah.
It is. You're never going to get a taste out of it. You've just got to keep licking. You've
Yeah.
got to lick that rock. Don't expect a taste out of it.
Yeah. Rock salt.
Yeah. That's if you're lucky. You get the rock salt.